Sarah Martinez had always been told she was too small, too weak, too emotional for the military. At 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing barely 120 pounds, she didn't fit the traditional image of a Navy SEAL. But what she lacked in size, she made up for in determination and an almost supernatural ability with a rifle. Growing up in rural Montana, Sarah learned to shoot before she could properly ride a bicycle. Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, taught her that precision mattered more than power. While other kids played video games, Sarah spent hours at the shooting range, perfecting her breathing, her stance, her trigger pull. By age 16, she could hit a target at 800 yards with consistency that amazed even experienced hunters. When Sarah announced her intention to join the Navy and pursue SEAL training, the reactions were predictable. Her high school guidance counselor suggested she consider nursing instead. Her own mother worried she was setting herself up for disappointment. Even some military recruiters seemed skeptical, though they couldn't legally discourage her. The first day of basic underwater demolition/SEAL training was brutal for everyone, but Sarah faced additional challenges. The physical demands were crushing: endless push-ups, swimming in frigid water, carrying heavy equipment through sand dunes. Her male counterparts, many of whom had played college football or wrestled competitively, seemed to handle the physical punishment with greater ease. During the infamous Hell Week, when candidates are pushed to their absolute limits with minimal sleep and constant physical stress, Sarah's small frame became both an advantage and a liability. She could slip through tight spaces that larger candidates struggled with, but carrying a 200-pound teammate during rescue simulations left her muscles screaming. The instructors watched her with particular intensity. Some seemed genuinely curious to see if she could make it. Others appeared to be waiting for her inevitable failure. During one particularly grueling exercise, she overheard an instructor telling another, "The girl's got heart, but heart doesn't stop bullets." What the instructors didn't know was that Sarah had been preparing for this moment her entire life. While her classmates partied in college, she had trained obsessively. She studied military history, learned multiple languages, and maintained a physical fitness regimen that would have impressed professional athletes. She understood that being the first meant she couldn't just be good enough. She had to be undeniably exceptional. The shooting portions of training became Sarah's opportunity to shine. While other candidates struggled with long-range accuracy, she consistently outperformed everyone. Her shots were so precise that instructors sometimes checked the equipment, convinced there must be some technical advantage they were missing. But technical skill alone wasn't enough. The psychological pressure was immense. Every mistake was scrutinized. Every success was dismissed as luck. When she missed a target during one training exercise, she could hear whispered comments about women not belonging in combat roles. When she succeeded, some claimed the instructors were going easy on her. The breaking point came during a simulated hostage rescue scenario. Sarah's team was tasked with neutralizing multiple targets while avoiding civilian casualties. As the designated sniper, she had to provide overwatch and eliminate threats from a concealed position 600 yards away. The scenario began with controlled chaos. Her teammates moved through the mock building while Sarah tracked multiple targets through her scope. The pressure was enormous. One missed shot could mean a failed exercise and potentially elimination from the program. Through her scope, she watched as one of the terrorists moved dangerously close to a hostage. The shot required threading the needle between friendly forces and innocent bystanders. The angle was difficult, the timing critical. Sarah controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow, and squeezed the trigger. The target dropped instantly. Then another appeared. Sarah adjusted her position, acquired the target, and fired again. Perfect hit. Within 90 seconds, she had eliminated 4 targets without a single missed shot, allowing her team to complete the rescue successfully. After the exercise, there was unusual silence from the instructors. Even the most skeptical seemed momentarily speechless. One finally approached Sarah and said, "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My grandfather taught me that every shot matters," she replied simply. Despite her obvious skills, the doubts persisted. Some fellow candidates began to respect her abilities, but others remained convinced that standards were being lowered. The psychological warfare continued. Comments about political correctness, whispers about publicity stunts, suggestions that she was only there to make the Navy look progressive. Sarah knew that graduating from SEAL training was just the beginning. Even if she made it through, she would face years of proving herself in a community that had never included women. Every mission would be a test, every success would be questioned, and every failure would be magnified. But she had come too far to quit now. The little girl who learned to shoot in the Montana mountains had become a woman who could outshoot almost anyone in the world's most elite military unit. The question wasn't whether she was good enough. The question was whether the SEALs were ready for her. As training continued, Sarah realized that her biggest enemy wasn't the physical challenges or even the institutional resistance. It was the constant pressure to prove that her success wasn't diminishing the standards that made the SEALs legendary. She couldn't just be a good SEAL. She had to be a perfect one. The final weeks of training approached, and Sarah knew that graduation was within reach. But she also understood that the real test would begin after graduation, when she finally deployed with an operational team. That's when she would discover whether years of preparation and months of brutal training would be enough to earn the respect she had fought so hard to achieve. Her instructors had stopped openly questioning her presence, but she could still feel their watchful eyes. They were waiting to see if the small woman from Montana could perform under real pressure when lives actually hung in the balance. Sarah was waiting for that test too. She had been preparing for her entire life. 3 years after graduating from SEAL training, Sarah Martinez found herself deployed to a forward operating base in eastern Afghanistan. The initial excitement of finally joining an operational team had quickly given way to frustration. Despite her exceptional training scores and proven marksmanship, she was often assigned to base security duties while her male teammates deployed on high-value missions. Team leader Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was a 15-year veteran who had commanded respect throughout the SEAL community. He wasn't openly hostile towards Sarah, but his skepticism was evident in his assignments. During briefings, he would explain complex tactical scenarios to other team members while giving Sarah simplified instructions. When equipment was distributed, she often received older or less sophisticated gear. "Martinez, you'll provide perimeter security while we handle the primary objective," Morrison announced during a mission briefing for a raid on a suspected Taliban commander's compound. It was the same assignment she had received for the past 6 missions. Sarah's teammate, Petty Officer First Class David Chun, had begun to notice the pattern. Chun was one of the few who had witnessed Sarah's shooting abilities during training exercises and understood that her skills were being wasted on guard duty. "Sir, Martinez has the best long-range accuracy on the team," Chun ventured during the briefing. "Maybe she should be our primary sniper for this operation." Morrison's jaw tightened slightly. "I'll decide team positions based on operational requirements, not training scores." The mission proceeded as planned, with Sarah once again relegated to watching the perimeter while her teammates executed the primary assault. The Taliban commander wasn't at the compound, and the team returned with minimal intelligence. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if a different approach, perhaps one that utilized her unique skills, might have yielded better results. The pattern continued for weeks. While other teams in the area were requesting Sarah's expertise for specialized missions, Morrison kept her close to base. Word began to spread through the SEAL community that the first female SEAL sniper was being underutilized. Some saw it as evidence that integration wasn't working. Others recognized it as a waste of exceptional talent. The situation reached a breaking point during a routine patrol that went catastrophically wrong. Morrison's team was conducting a village assessment when they were ambushed by a well-coordinated Taliban unit. The attackers had positioned themselves on high ground, using the terrain to pin down the SEALs in an exposed valley. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions. Morrison's team dove for cover behind a low stone wall, but their situation was desperate. The Taliban fighters had superior positioning and were systematically eliminating any attempt at movement. "We need air support," Morrison shouted into his radio, but the nearest helicopter was 20 minutes away. 2 team members were already wounded, and their ammunition was running low. Sarah assessed the situation with the tactical clarity her training had instilled. Through her scope, she could identify at least 6 enemy positions scattered across the hillside, approximately 400 to 800 yards away. The angles were difficult, and several targets were partially concealed behind rocks and vegetation. "Sir, I can take out those positions," Sarah called to Morrison over the sound of gunfire. "Negative. Maintain your position and watch our 6. But Sarah could see what Morrison couldn't from his position. The Taliban fighters were moving to flank their location. In minutes, they would have the team completely surrounded. Someone needed to eliminate the threat, and she was the only one with a clear line of sight to all enemy positions. Chun, who was wounded in the shoulder but still functional, crawled over to Sarah's position. "Do what you have to do," he whispered. "I'll cover you with Morrison." Sarah made a decision that would define her career. She moved to a position that offered better angles on the enemy positions, knowing that Morrison would likely court-martial her for disobeying a direct order. But court-martial was better than watching her teammates die because of bureaucratic stubbornness. The first shot was the most critical. Sarah had identified the enemy commander based on his positioning and the way other fighters seemed to defer to his signals. The range was nearly 750 yards, uphill, with a crosswind that required significant adjustment. She controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow to its familiar rhythm, and squeezed the trigger. The enemy commander dropped instantly. The Taliban unit's coordinated fire immediately became chaotic as fighters looked around in confusion. Sarah didn't pause. She had identified her next target, a machine gunner who had been laying down suppressing fire that kept her team pinned. Another breath, another perfectly calculated shot. The machine gun fell silent. Within 3 minutes, Sarah had eliminated 4 enemy fighters and wounded 2 others. The remaining Taliban fighters, realizing they were being systematically picked off by an unseen sniper, broke contact and retreated up the hillside. The valley fell silent except for the distant sound of approaching helicopters. Morrison stared at Sarah with an expression that mixed anger, amazement, and grudging respect. "I gave you a direct order to maintain position," he said. "Yes, sir. But maintaining position would have resulted in casualties that I could prevent." Morrison looked around at his team, wounded but alive thanks to Sarah's intervention. Chun was receiving medical attention for his shoulder wound, but he managed a thumbs up in Sarah's direction. Over the next several hours, as the team was extracted and debriefed, the magnitude of Sarah's performance became clear. She had engaged multiple targets at extended range under combat conditions while her teammates were under fire. Every shot had been precise, every decision tactical sound. Word of the engagement spread quickly through the forward operating base. Other SEAL teams began requesting Sarah for their missions. Intelligence officers wanted to know more about the sniper who could eliminate targets at ranges that challenged even veteran marksmen. Morrison found himself in an uncomfortable position. He could discipline Sarah for disobeying orders, but doing so would mean punishing the soldier who had saved his team. Moreover, higher command was taking notice of Sarah's exceptional performance. 3 days later, Morrison called Sarah into his office. She expected to face disciplinary action, possibly even dismissal from the team. Instead, Morrison stood up and extended his hand. "Martinez, I owe you an apology. I've been thinking about this wrong. I've been so concerned about proving that standards haven't been lowered that I forgot the most important standard, mission effectiveness." Sarah shook his hand, uncertain where the conversation was heading. "From now on, you're our primary sniper. No more guard duty unless the mission specifically requires it. I want you training with the best long-range specialists we can find. If we're going to have the first female SEAL sniper, she's going to be the best damn sniper in the Navy." For the first time since joining the team, Sarah felt like she was truly part of the unit rather than a political statement or experimental addition. But she also understood that Morrison's change of heart was just the beginning. The real test would come when her skills were tested against the most dangerous enemies in the most challenging conditions. That test was coming sooner than anyone expected. 6 months after proving herself in the Valley ambush, Sarah Martinez faced the mission that would cement her reputation forever. Intelligence had located a high-value Taliban leader responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. The target, known as the engineer for his expertise with improvised explosive devices, was planning a major assault on a nearby city that housed thousands of civilians. The mission was unlike anything Sarah's team had attempted. The engineer was holed up in a fortified compound built into a mountainside, surrounded by nearly 50 heavily armed fighters. Traditional assault approaches would result in massive casualties and likely allow the target to escape through a network of caves that intelligence couldn't fully map. The solution required precision that pushed even Sarah's abilities to their absolute limit. She would need to eliminate key sentries and commanders from an overwatch position nearly 1,200 yards away, allowing her teammates to infiltrate the compound during the confusion. Colonel Rebecca Hayes, the overall mission commander, had specifically requested Sarah for the operation after reviewing her performance reports. Hayes was one of the highest-ranking women in special operations and understood both the opportunity and the risk of the mission. Martinez, this isn't just about tactical success, Colonel Hayes explained during the final briefing. Every eye in the military is watching. Success proves that integration works. Failure sets back women in special operations by decades. Sarah felt the weight of representation, but she had learned to channel that pressure into focus. She had spent the past months training with the Navy's most experienced snipers, refining techniques for extreme-range shooting in mountainous terrain. The approach to the target took 18 hours. Sarah's team moved through treacherous mountain terrain under cover of darkness, carrying specialized equipment that would allow her to engage targets at unprecedented distances. Her rifle, a custom-modified system designed specifically for extreme range, weighed nearly 30 pounds, including the advanced optics and stabilization equipment. Morrison, who had become one of Sarah's strongest supporters, led the team through paths that local guides claimed were impassable. Sarah carried her equipment without complaint, even when the thin mountain air left everyone gasping for breath. Target compound is 2 clicks ahead, Morrison whispered into his radio as they approached the final overwatch position. Martinez, how's your equipment? Sarah checked her rifle system for the 100th time. Everything was perfect. Wind meters showed variable conditions that would require constant adjustment. The range to target was 1,187 yards, according to her laser rangefinder. At that distance, bullet drop would be significant, and the mountain winds would push her shots off target if she didn't compensate perfectly. System is green. I can see the compound through thermal imaging, counting 12 sentries in overwatch positions, plus regular patrols. The plan was intricate. Sarah would eliminate specific targets in a predetermined sequence, creating blind spots that would allow Morrison's assault team to approach undetected. The timing had to be perfect, too fast, and the remaining guards would realize they were under attack. Too slow, and the target might escape. Sarah settled into her shooting position as dawn approached. The rocky outcrop provided excellent concealment and clear lines of sight to the compound. Through her scope, she could observe the daily routine of the Taliban fighters. They changed guard positions every 2 hours, creating brief windows when certain areas of the compound were less well defended. Alpha team in position. Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece. Beta team ready for insertion. Martinez, you have authorization to engage targets. Sarah acquired her first target, a sentry positioned on the highest tower of the compound. The shot was approximately 1,150 yards, slightly uphill, with a crosswind that required 3 minutes of angle compensation. She had practiced this exact scenario dozens of times, but never with lives hanging in the balance. She controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow to its familiar rhythm, and squeezed the trigger. The specially designed bullet took nearly 2 seconds to reach the target. Through her scope, she watched the sentry collapse silently. The other guards didn't notice immediately. Sarah had 60 seconds before the next guard change would reveal the missing sentry. She acquired her second target, another sentry positioned on the opposite side of the compound. This shot was even more challenging. The range was 1,200 yards, and the target was partially concealed behind a stone barrier. Sarah had to time the shot for a moment when the guard stepped into her line of sight. She waited, controlled her breathing, and fired the moment the target appeared. Another perfect hit. The compound security was systematically being dismantled, and the remaining guards had no idea they were under attack. Over the next 8 minutes, Sarah eliminated 6 key targets, creating exactly the security gaps that Morrison's team needed. Her shots were so precise and well-timed that the Taliban fighters never realized they were being systematically neutralized by a sniper over a kilometer away. Alpha Team, moving to compound. Excellent work, Martinez. Maintain overwatch. But as Morrison's team approached the compound, Sarah noticed movement in the cave system behind the main building. Through her thermal scope, she could see figures moving through what appeared to be an escape tunnel. Morrison, I have movement in the cave system. Looks like our target is trying to escape through the back door. Can you get a shot? Sarah studied the terrain. The cave entrance was nearly 1,300 yards away, an extreme angle that would require her to adjust for both distance and elevation. Worse, she would have only seconds when the target emerged from the cave before he disappeared into the rocky terrain beyond. Negative on direct shot to cave entrance. But I can cover the exit point if he tries to escape to the north. Sarah repositioned herself, moving to a new location that offered a better angle on the likely escape route. As she settled into the new position, she could hear gunfire erupting from the compound as Morrison's team engaged the remaining Taliban fighters. Through her scope, Sarah watched the cave system intently. Thermal imaging showed multiple figures moving through the underground passages. Suddenly, 3 men emerged from a concealed exit nearly 1,400 yards from Sarah's position. The center figure matched the description of the engineer. This was her chance, probably the only opportunity to prevent him from escaping and continuing his campaign of terror against innocent civilians. The shot was at the absolute limit of her equipment and training. The distance was beyond anything she had attempted in combat. The target was moving, and she would have only one opportunity before he disappeared into a maze of mountain trails where helicopters couldn't follow. Sarah made the calculations instinctively: bullet drop, wind compensation, target movement. She led the target slightly, accounting for the time it would take the bullet to travel nearly a mile through thin mountain air. She squeezed the trigger and watched through her scope as the bullet traveled its ballistic arc. For what seemed like an eternity, she couldn't tell if the shot had connected. Then, the engineer collapsed. His 2 companions dove for cover, looking around frantically for the source of the shot that had come from an impossible distance. Target down, Sarah reported calmly into her radio. The engineer is neutralized. The compound fell silent as Morrison's team completed their assault. When the final count was complete, they had eliminated nearly 30 enemy fighters and captured significant intelligence about planned attacks. Most importantly, they had prevented the engineer from carrying out operations that could have killed hundreds of innocent people. As the extraction helicopter arrived, Morrison approached Sarah with an expression of amazed respect. 1,400 yards? In these conditions? Martinez, that's the longest confirmed sniper kill in SEAL history. Colonel Hayes was waiting when they returned to base. Word of the mission's success had already reached the highest levels of command. Sarah's performance had not only succeeded tactically, but had definitively proven that women could excel in the most demanding special operations roles. Martinez, I've received calls from 3 different general officers asking about your availability for their units, Colonel Hayes said. Seems like the entire special operations community wants the sniper who can hit targets at impossible ranges. But for Sarah, the mission represented something more than professional success. The doubts that had followed her throughout training and early deployment had finally been silenced, not through politics or social pressure, but through undeniable performance under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Morrison, who had once questioned her presence on the team, now considered her irreplaceable. Chun and the other team members treated her not as a female SEAL or a diversity initiative, but simply as the best sniper they had ever served with. In the months that followed, Sarah's reputation spread throughout the military. Her techniques were studied at sniper schools, her equipment modifications were adopted by other units, and her tactical innovations became standard training protocols. More importantly, the path she had cleared was followed by other women who entered special operations roles. They still faced challenges and skepticism, but Sarah's legacy provided proof that excellence transcended gender. Years later, when young women asked Sarah about breaking barriers in the military, she would tell them the same thing her grandfather had taught her in those mountains of Montana. Every shot matters. Make yours count. The battlefield had gone quiet that day, not because of politics or social change, but because a small woman from Montana had demonstrated that precision, dedication, and skill were the only qualifications that truly mattered in the world's most demanding profession.